In this video, we're going to try to address what you might see and what you would be wise to prepare for in the less than 38 days before the election and the 62 days after the election leading up to the results being ratified by Congress on January 6th. With events surrounding the 2020 election causing a lot of uncertainty and unrest around the nation, how will this play out this time, and will you be ready? If you're new to this channel, my name is Chris, and on this channel we discuss emergency preparedness, aka prepping. In a recent poll that I just posted in the community tab on my channel, I asked you, the community, 43 days left, how concerned are you about the US elections on November the 5th? The results, they were not shocking to me, and probably not to you either. 63% of the over 17,000 respondents expressed that they were very concerned and that there's a strong possibility for severe civil unrest. Another 23% expressed that they were somewhat concerned and that people would be upset, but that's about it. Now, only a meager 12% expressed that they were not concerned at all. When you have a number that is 86% very to somewhat concerned, you know that we have to discuss the possibilities of the threat. And I would do the same here if it were an 86% chance that I was in a storm path or 86% chance of a dam breaking. So I'm going to address in this video a synopsis of how we got here, what you should watch for on election day and through to January the 6th, and what preps you would be prudent to put in place right now. And I'm also going to approach this subject the city prepping way by rising above the politics, the rhetoric, and the name calling so prevalent in our media today. You're going to want to stick around through the entirety of this video to understand the threat, but I'm also going to tell you the solutions to plug in today for your safer tomorrow. Now, if you follow my channel for any length of time, you know that I think proper prepping is more important than political opinion. Today, unfortunately, we have to factor in preparing against civil unrest resulting from politics. Still, the day in and day out arguments about which side is right, wrong, indifferent, violent, or weak genuinely get in the way of prepping, especially the aspect of prepping that is community. You'll see it in the media, in sound bites, and even in the comment thread on the poll that I mentioned. The opinions and comments range from declarations of you better vote this way or that way to votes of no confidence in the system, falsehoods, anger, outrage, and so much more. Now, what the comments revealed, at least to me, is that as Americans, we are divided, at least as probably worse than any other time I've seen that I can recall in my life. We're disillusioned with the government and in some cases the voting process. We conflate the politicians and parties into criminal masterminds and puppet masters when they are truly just propagandists. We're vulnerable to foreign and domestic amplification of misinformation. And most of all, we distrust the system, the people, and even our neighbors, friends, and family. And there's no denying that we are a nation that's increasingly becoming divided, and that makes us a target for attackers, both foreign and domestic. And that's something that you need to prepare for. How we got here. Here are some current dates that you should be concerned about. Polls open for in-person voting on November 5th. In the last election cycle, 54% of people voted in person. 27% of those voted on election day, as some polls are open earlier than election day. Some states are early voting right now. Vote by mail ballots and absentee ballots made up the remaining 46% of the voters in the 2020 election cycle, and they must be returned by mail in order to be counted. Typically, it must be postmarked on or before Election Day and received by your county elections office by November 12th. Voting by mail is often the only way our overseas military, citizens abroad, and students can vote. Now, while some states may count these mail ballots earlier, many don't open them until after the in-person ballots have been counted. All the vote counts then go to the election officials for the state, who then have between 3 and 33 days after the election to ensure the election results are correct. Now, even if a candidate wins a million more votes nationwide, that does not guarantee that they're going to become president because the Electoral College decides the outcome. In the 2000 election, George W. Bush's narrow lead of 1,784 votes in Florida led to a recount, focusing on a small batch of untallied ballots. Protests led by all Republican staffers erupted, and the recount chaos ultimately led Al Gore to concede, with Florida's electoral votes securing Bush's victory. Now, he received nearly 500,000 more votes than his opponent. Now, more recently, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. She received nearly 2.9 million more votes than Donald Trump. However, like Al Gore in 2000, she lost the election because Donald Trump won the majority of the electoral votes, 304 to Clinton's 227. Then, in the United States presidential election of 2020, Biden won 7 million more votes and Trump a sum equivalent to every resident in the state of Massachusetts or Arizona. But still, despite this, accusations of voter fraud were raised in many states. And the official certification of the results was, of course, delayed until January the 6th. The United States U.S. presidential election went to the Supreme Court. In the case, Bush v. Gore involved the recount of votes in Florida. And after a series of legal battles over the recount process, the United States Supreme Court ultimately ruled in a 5-4 decision to stop the recount on December 12th of 2000, effectively awarding Florida's electoral votes to George W. Bush. Now, this decision ended the election dispute and led to Bush's victory, as Florida's electoral votes gave him the majority needed in the Electoral College. And we're a quarter century beyond that election, considerably more divided as a nation and considerably more volatile and on edge. Now, the likelihood of hundreds of court cases being filed to question the election outcomes in each state is all but inevitable. Several states have put the power to hold election results in abeyance without proof but just suspicion of possible wrongs. That means that if an election official doesn't care for the outcome, they don't have to submit the results. They don't need any evidence of any wrongdoing. Court battles in this election cycle are pretty much a given. If any one of these cases rises to the level of the Supreme Court, the next president may be chosen by 9 Supreme Court justices and not the will of the people nor the electors of the Electoral College. Now, such an outcome will raise the anger and volatility of about half of those who voted in the last election. That means about 75 million Americans will not like the outcome of a Supreme Court decision. What to watch for? If you remember the protest that shut down the 2000 vote count in Florida, it was later referred to as the Brooks Brother riot. A number of those demonstrators later took jobs in the incoming Bush administration. America was duped into thinking there was a protest of fellow citizens when it was very much orchestrated by the same individuals who later got positions in the White House. America was led to believe that maybe there was a legitimate problem when really a few people didn't like how the recount was going, so they shut it down. So you will definitely want to watch for civil unrest around vote counting areas or state and federal buildings. The same type of orchestrated shutdown of the vote count could occur in any state or county across the country. It may not be led by seasoned politicians this time. It could be bands of citizens motivated by the inflamed rhetoric from the media or politicians, still orchestrated but less intentionally driven by the perpetuators of the delay. What it would do, however, is call into question the entire state's voting results. Imagine that a poll location had its ballot seized or destroyed in the conflict. That would leave thousands disenfranchised. You'll also want to watch for any efforts to tamper or disrupt the voting process on the part of official state, local, or federal government. We're less than 40 days from Election Day, but my concern lies in the 62 days between November 5th, 2024 and January 6th of 2025. This period, from when in-person polls open to when Congress certifies the results, is critical. Politicians often stretch the truth and amplify false information under the guise of raising awareness. And this can have serious consequences, as seen in Springfield, Ohio, which has received 33 bomb threats following the spread of an internet rumor. What used to be called lying is now often the latest news alert. There's a lot of misinformation and exaggerated or completely false stories out there intentionally spread solely to rile you up and to make you angry. During this time, we are already witnessing significant exaggerations and falsehoods that are leading to multiple bomb threats and further dividing our population. A troubling trend known as swatting involves Americans hiring foreign actors who use voice over IP to hide their phone numbers while making false emergency reports. Swatting is a dangerous and illegal prank where someone falsely reports a serious incident, like a hostage situation or a bomb threat, at someone else's address. And of course, first responders have to take these threats seriously. You're going to want to watch for these swatting events on and after Election Day. Don't get caught up in the rumor mill, but take these threats seriously enough to leave the area and get to safety. I don't think we've had this level of misinformation ever in our history as a country. So I do have concerns about bad actors, both foreign and domestic. The level of misinformation that we're already seeing is the most concerning thing in this election cycle. Convenient lies spread among some people faster than the truth can keep up, no matter how outlandish. Furthermore, we have to acknowledge that foreign adversaries are seizing this divided time in our history to fuel these divisions, exaggerations, and falsehoods, increasing the likelihood of conflict. And as a result, we are nearing some potentially volatile situations. So above all else, watch for misinformation. If some headline, soundbite, or accusation has fired you up, understanding this was the intention. Seek the source for any news, verify that source, cross-reference the facts against other credible news sources, and question the source's credibility before you buy into and accept something as truth. What to do? Given our history over the last 5 election cycles and the run-up to this one, which is already fraught with contention, accusations, and misinformation, I don't see us as emerging from this election cycle as a country without at least a few bumps, scrapes, and bruises, and I hope that's not an understatement. So, faced with that stress-inducing reality, what are we to do? First, I always preach on this channel to stay calm. This is a reason why you prepare, and if you don't prep, this is a reason you should be preparing. Think of this coming election as storm clouds on the horizon. Each hostility or piece of misinformation is a clap of thunder or a flash of lightning. If you know the storm is coming, it's not the time to picnic outdoors under a tree in the park. It's time to hunker down, keep your head on a swivel, and be situationally aware and on alert. Stress and anxiety can motivate you, but they shouldn't be driving and controlling your actions. Now is the time to plan for the worst your area might face. Perhaps civil unrest in your area will lead to wide-scale power outage, or the blocking of roadways and bridges, curfews, or the inability to run to the grocery store. Perhaps deliveries of food or fuel may be blocked and stop flowing to your area. Somewhere on a scale of nothing to martial law, your area may experience interruptions of utilities, the flow of traffic, public safety, fuel, or food supply. And the best prep against that is to have a bare minimum of 3 weeks or 3 months of water and food set aside in your preps. Now, regarding your preps, please understand that you may very well see some panic stocking up on the days before Election Day, and you will see, certainly, if there's any hint of chaos or civil unrest. You only have to reflect on the early days of COVID to remember what that was like. Around the same time President Trump declared a national emergency concerning the novel coronavirus disease outbreak, many stores implemented strict capacity limits to reduce the spread of the virus. And these restrictions began in March of 2020 and vary by location and severity of the outbreak. You remember the toilet paper runs, purchase limits, and empty shelves. Something like that can happen after any disaster or during times of national peak stress, anxiety, or uncertainty. And it's best to get your preps in place ahead of any panic buying. As one subscriber commented on the poll, "I'm going to hunker down until it's over. Please stay peaceful, everyone. It's all in our best interest." I think that's a good strategy. You might want to bug in on some of those important dates and leave any craziness outside. And while I don't think it's prudent to hibernate and bug in for more than 60 days, I do think that being prepared to bug in for at least a minimum of 3 weeks is in your best interest. If it turns out you only need to stay indoors overnight, for a day, or just a few days, you're going to emerge no worse for wear. And I will tell you that your personal security is a prep. I personally have a CCW license, and one of the things that you learn when you get that is not to put yourself in a situation where confrontation is a likely outcome. Avoiding conflict instead of seeking it is very important. You need to limit your travel to necessary travel. And don't be afraid of taking the day off or working from home if that is an option on days when conflict zones in your area are possible. You want to make sure that you have an alternate route to avoid any areas where conflict may be possible. And you can limit travel and stay home as much as possible, or you could hang out in front of a polling center. One of these locations will avoid conflict and the other might find you in the middle of it. Above all else, we often stress on this channel the need to stay calm. You've probably heard the term cooler heads prevail, and it's especially true in a crisis or disaster situation. Maintaining your situational awareness and staying focused on your next steps will keep you alive when others are losing their minds, panicked, and crippled with fear. You can get that calm in 3 ways: having a plan to deal with the disaster, having preps to sustain you through the disaster, and staying focused on the facts. The last one is the hardest for most people because it's in our nature to get involved and take action, but I would caution you not to do that in this situation, in this climate. On the contrary, if you are ever going to try and have a few days without social media or news feeds, this would be the time. Rather than stress about minor conflicts that might occur thousands of miles from you and watch them on a continual loop on some mainstream media channel, try instead to turn off the systems and incessant alerts and find your calm. A few decades ago, we all get along just fine without the thousands of alerts, pings, 24-hour repeating news, and pundits telling us what they believe to be truth and how outraged and upset that we should be. Every device and every app we have today comes with alerts turned up by default. We're often bombarded by a Las Vegas slot machine-like cacophony of lights, messages, sound bites, pings, and chimes. And at some point, that drives our cortisone levels higher. And sadly, what we're seeing now is that it's also amplifying stories that aren't true and spreading them to levels that have real-world consequences. Just ask the folks in Springfield, Ohio about that. So consider muting some of the noise, but do stay informed of anything in your immediate vicinity. I don't know how this election is going to turn out. However it does, half of America is going to be angry and the other half is going to be pleased. And I hope that you're going to be prepared for the worst and hope for the best. That's what I'll be doing. Do vote and have your single voice counted, but also prepare for a possible bugging in period. Silence the voices that only want to agitate you and keep your calm and situational awareness about you. Look, I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but I do know that you can maximize your own safety through preparedness. And hopefully this potential disaster will amount to nothing, but then you'll also be prepared for potential natural disasters. And getting prepared, it's just a good idea regardless of the disaster we face. I'm going to link to 2 critical videos here on the side of the screen to watch next and in the comments in the description section below. The first is 22 survival items to get before 2025, and that's going to help you understand the things you need to prepare for a basic lockdown period, and also what you're likely to see people panic buying before, during, and after a disaster. The other video is a prepper's guide to bugging in after a disaster, which will help you understand what it takes to stay put when that's your best option after a disaster, and I encourage you to watch both of these. As always, stay safe out there.